You've been walking through seasons that don't add up. You've cried prayers that seem to bounce off the ceiling. You've faced battles that felt unjustified, delays that made no sense, and doors that stayed shut while you were banging with faith. But I came to tell you today, God is about to make it all make sense. What you saw as broken, He saw as building. What you called confusion, He called construction. And what you thought was the end was just His divine setup for a greater revelation. Pain has a way of making us feel abandoned, overlooked, or forgotten. It creeps in during the midnight hours of our lives, whispering lies that maybe God isn't listening. Maybe He's forgotten our name. But the truth is, there isn't a single tear that falls from your eye that heaven doesn't record. God is a redeemer, not a waster. If He allowed it, it wasn't meaningless. It was loaded with purpose far beyond what you can see right now. The problem we often face is that we want God to do great things through us without letting Him dig deep within us. And that digging often comes through pain. It's in the stretching, the pressing, the breaking, that the oil is released. You cannot step into anointing without first walking through adversity. God uses the H to awaken you. He uses what hurts to shape what heals. While you were begging Him to take the pain away, He was using it to take the weakness out of you. Sometimes pain is permitted so your comfort won't become your cage. When everything is easy, you lose hunger. But pain keeps you desperate. And desperation births a level of faith you didn't know you had. You find yourself praying prayers you never would have prayed, clinging to scriptures you never used to read, walking by faith in ways you never had the courage to walk before. That's not random. That's refining. God isn't punishing you. He's preparing you. You can't learn perseverance in a palace. You learn it in the wilderness. And when the fire of affliction gets hot, it doesn't mean God has abandoned you. It means He's close, right in the fire with you, shaping you into something pure. He's burning away what can't stay in the next season. He's removing dependencies that can't follow you to the next level. And He's doing it all through the very thing you prayed He would stop. God will use pain to shift your posture. When pride rises, pain humbles. When fear paralyzes, pain forces movement. It's a teacher like no other. Brutal, yes, but transformational. It opens your ears to what comfort has kept quiet. It clears your vision and rearranges your priorities. Pain will expose what's real and what's merely religious. It will break you of surface, level living, and force you into deep, honest dependency on God. And when you walk through that kind of pain, you begin to understand that it's not about escape. It's about encounter. You're not going to get out of every fiery trial, but you will meet the fourth man in the fire. You'll discover that even if the storm doesn't stop, His presence is enough to hold you steady. The goal isn't always deliverance. Sometimes it's revelation. And what He shows you in the pain will become the very anchor that holds you in future storms. Pain has a way of clearing out the noise. It reveals who's really with you. It strips away the performance, the applause, the opinions, and brings you face to face with the only one who never leaves. You find out in the pain who your God really is. Not the version others preach to you, but the one who held you in the dark. And once you meet God in pain, you'll never settle for surface religion again. There are some levels of strength you cannot receive through sermons, podcasts, or praise songs. They can only be forged through the furnace. That's where your endurance is shaped. That's where your discernment matures. That's where you gain eyes that can see through deception and ears that are tuned to heaven's whisper. You don't get that in comfort. You get that when everything falls apart and God becomes your only option. And even though you didn't choose the pain, God can still use the pain. He can take the ashes of your story and breathe fire into your purpose. You may feel like you've been shattered, but He's not afraid of broken things. He specializes in restoration. And restoration doesn't just mean putting the pieces back together. It means building something stronger than what existed before. Your pain may have changed you, but it didn't destroy you. And that shift is divine. The pain didn't come to define you. It came to develop you. You are not what happened to you. You are who God is calling you to become through it. The enemy wanted you bitter, but God is making you better. The enemy wanted you to quit, but God is building your capacity. Every wound, every scar, every moment of aching silence, it's being woven into something beautiful, something eternal, something that cannot be shaken. There are moments in your life when heaven seems quiet. You pray and all you hear is your own voice echoing in the silence. You read the word and it feels like ink on paper instead of fire in your bones. You wait for answers, for signs, for direction, but instead of clarity, you're met with stillness. It's in those moments that your faith is tested not by what you hear, but by what you don't. And what you must understand is that silence is not God's absence. It is often the setting for His greatest revelations. The silence of God is not a void, it's a canvas. It is where He draws the outlines of the next move, the next instruction, the next unfolding of purpose. When God is silent, it doesn't mean He's inactive. It means He's setting the stage. You don't always see what He's doing behind the scenes, but trust that the author never stops writing, even when the pen seems still. His silence is not a stop, it's a space where He invites you to lean in deeper, not drift away. Silence is the soil in which spiritual maturity grows. It strips away the noise, the distractions, the easy affirmations. When you can't hear Him, you're forced to trust Him. And that kind of trust doesn't develop in the middle of miracles. It develops in the middle of mystery. In the silence, your roots are forced to go deeper. You start to hunger for God in a way you never did. When the answers came easily, you start searching, pressing in, lingering longer in His presence. Not for what He gives, but for who He is. Some of God's greatest moves begin with silence. Before the Red Sea parted, there was confusion. Before the walls of Jericho fell, there were 6 days of marching with no change. Before Jesus spoke resurrection to Lazarus, there were 4 days of silence in a tomb. God's silence is never pointless. It's always pregnant. Pregnant with purpose, with timing, with layers of strategy you can't see yet. And when He finally speaks, the weight of that word will shake everything in your life. Silence reveals what you really believe. When the signs stop, will you still follow? When the blessings seem to pause, will your worship stay steady? When He says nothing, will your obedience still echo from yesterday's command? Revelation doesn't always come with lightning and thunder. Sometimes it comes in whispers, in stillness, in the quiet conviction that God is still there, still good, still in control, even when He hasn't said a word. There is a deep work God does in silence that He cannot do in noise. In silence, your idols are exposed. Your dependencies are stripped. Your motives are tested. He doesn't want you to follow him just for the miracles. He wants your heart to beat for him even when your hands are empty. Silence purifies your pursuit. It sifts your soul. It separates the surface followers from those who walk by faith, not by sight. When God finally speaks after the silence, what he says will often shift your whole trajectory. It won't be shallow. It won't be random. It will carry the weight of the waiting. Because God doesn't waste silence. He loads it with depth. By the time the revelation arrives, you'll be able to carry it. Because you've been prepared in the stillness. What would have crushed you before the silence can now be stewarded after the silence. Silence is where prophets are forged. It's where visionaries are refined. It's where leaders are broken and remade. You cannot carry divine revelation unless you've first walked through divine quiet. Because revelation without preparation leads to arrogance. But when you've been humbled by the hush of heaven, you'll carry the revelation with reverence, not pride. You'll speak not as one who simply heard a word, but as one who has lived in the tension of its delay. Don't mistake God's silence for his indifference. He's not ignoring you. He's inviting you into a deeper trust. He's weaning you off emotional dependency and training you to live on spiritual certainty. The silence is where you learn to stand, to wait, to believe without evidence. And that kind of faith shakes hell more than all the loud declarations in the world. Revelation doesn't come cheap. It is often purchased with seasons of stillness, with long nights of wrestling, with days when you wondered if he'd ever speak again. But when it comes, it makes the silence sacred. It redeems every second of wondering, every moment of confusion. Because once he reveals, you realize he wasn't punishing you with silence. He was preparing you for something you wouldn't have been able to carry without it. Waiting is one of the hardest assignments in the kingdom. When God gives you a promise and then places you in a holding pattern, it feels like the spiritual ground beneath your feet starts to shake. You begin to wonder if you heard him correctly. Doubt whispers lies, fear grows louder, and impatience creeps in like a slow storm. But what we call delay, heaven calls development. God is never late, and he's never in a rush. His timing is perfect, and his pauses are intentional. The gap between the promise and the manifestation is not a punishment. It is a process. It is in the delay that character is formed, integrity is tested, and endurance is built. Everybody wants destiny, but not everybody is willing to be developed. Delay is God's way of ensuring that when you step into what he has for you, you won't crumble under the weight of it. The greater the promise, the deeper the preparation. And that preparation often feels like silence, stillness, and standing still while everything else seems to be moving. There are blessings that would have destroyed you had they arrived too early. There are doors that would have opened into disaster if you'd walked through them before your time. Delay is not a no, it's a not yet. And in that not yet, God is strengthening your foundation. Because when you're called to carry influence, visibility, or spiritual authority, you need roots that are deeper than your reach. Delay is where God digs those roots deep. Sometimes we interpret closed doors and unanswered prayers as divine rejection. But God sees the entire road while we only see the next step. He delays not to deprive, but to protect. He will frustrate your plans when they threaten his purpose. He will hold you back when the timing is premature. Because he's not just after your moment. He's after your maturity, and maturity takes time. Development isn't glamorous, but it's essential. In the delay, God is aligning people, positioning resources, orchestrating events you haven't even seen yet. What looks like stagnation is actually synchronization. He's preparing things behind the scenes so that when the curtain finally lifts, it all makes sense. You think you're standing still, but heaven is moving. You think nothing is happening, but angels are being dispatched, connections are being made, and hearts are being stirred, all in preparation for your arrival at the appointed time. The delay tests your trust. Can you obey without updates? Can you stay faithful without fresh instructions? Can you keep worshiping when your timeline is falling apart? That's where real faith is forged. In the delay, in the unanswered seasons, in the wilderness between promise and fulfillment. Delay teaches you to live by conviction instead of confirmation. It teaches you to walk by faith, not by sight. God doesn't give premature promotion. He waits until the fullness of time. Just like a baby can't be born at 2 months, your destiny can't emerge until it's matured in the womb of preparation. The delay is not God's disapproval. It's his discipline. And discipline is proof of sonship. If he's delaying you, it means he's shaping you. You're not forgotten, you're being formed. You're not overlooked, you're being overhauled. The danger of trying to skip delay is that you might arrive underdeveloped. You might find yourself in a position your character can't sustain. God would rather you feel delayed for a season than disqualified for a lifetime. The waiting room of destiny is where giants are grown, not in the spotlight, but in the shadows. Every minute of delay is molding something inside you that instant success could never produce. Even Jesus, the Son of God, had to wait. He waited 30 years for a 3-year ministry. Why? Because preparation always precedes purpose. If Jesus wasn't exempt from delay, neither are you. But here's the beauty of it. What's developed in delay will be undeniable in destiny. When you finally step into what God promised, it will be evident that only God could have orchestrated it, timed it, and shaped it to fit like a divine glove. So don't despise the delay. Don't curse the waiting season. Don't assume the silence means no. Every second is soaked in purpose. Every day is building something eternal. You are not being held back. You are being held together. You are not being punished. You are being prepared. Because when God finally says go, nothing and no one will be able to stop what he developed in the delay. Life has a way of breaking us in places we never expected. We don't see it coming, the betrayal, the failure, the diagnosis, the loss. It shatters our expectations, leaves us picking up the remnants of what used to be whole. And in those broken places, it can feel like God's plan has been ruined. But what we often forget is that God doesn't require perfection to fulfill his purpose. He works through fragments. He builds his plan not in spite of brokenness, but through it. Some of the most powerful testimonies begin in wreckage. What man sees as disqualified, God sees as usable. Your past mistakes, your shattered dreams, your emotional wounds, they don't disqualify you from purpose. They prepare you for it. God has never needed flawless people to do his perfect will. He chooses the broken to display his glory, to show that his strength is made perfect in weakness. What's cracked in your life is not a curse, it's a canvas for God's creativity. When you feel disassembled, like the pieces of your life no longer fit, remember the potter never throws away clay. He doesn't discard what's damaged. He remakes it, reshapes it, and repurposes it. He knows how to gather the fragments and fashion them into something even stronger than the original. You may see a mess, but he sees a mosaic, a story of redemption where each scar has significance. What you try to hide, God will use to help someone else heal. Brokenness has a way of humbling you. It strips away self-reliance and teaches you to lean completely on the one who never fails. In the crushing, pride is shattered. In the breaking, dependence is born. It's when we hit the end of ourselves that we begin to access the depths of God's strength. Your broken season isn't proof that God left you. It's proof that He's refining you. He's cutting away what can't stay. He's healing in ways that comfort never could. God is the only one who can take a broken life and produce beauty from it. He doesn't just patch things up. He brings transformation. The pieces of your story that you wish didn't exist. The divorce, the addiction, the shame, the failure. Those are the very places He'll shine His light through. Because when others see the cracks and still witness His power flowing through you, they'll know it was Him, not you, holding everything together. There are no throwaway moments in God's economy. Every heartbreak, every setback, every breakdown is folded into His divine blueprint. You might feel like you're too far gone, too damaged, too late, but those are lies from the enemy. God has never been intimidated by brokenness. In fact, it's often the requirement for elevation. The people He uses the most are rarely the ones who've had it easy. They're the ones who've been broken and rebuilt by His hands. Even in Scripture, the feeding of the 5,000 didn't begin until the bread was broken. Before the miracle came the breaking. And when it was over, Jesus instructed the disciples to gather the leftover pieces, because even the fragments had value. That is how God sees your life. Even the leftover pieces you thought were useless, He is gathering. He is collecting what others dismissed and saying, I can still use this. The enemy wants you to believe that brokenness is the end of your story, that it disqualifies you from walking in purpose. But God uses broken people to reach other broken people. He turns your pain into a platform, your mess into a message, your scars into signposts that point others toward hope. What nearly destroyed you will become the very thing that defines your ministry. Not because of what happened, but because of what God did through it. You may not recognize the person you've become through the breaking, but that's the point. God didn't want the old you to carry the new assignment. He used the breaking to birth a version of you that is more dependent, more anointed, and more equipped. You may be limping, but you're still walking. You may have cried through it, but you survived it. And that survival is not ordinary. It is divine evidence that God's plan is still unfolding. The power of God's plan is not that it avoids brokenness, but that it redeems it. He doesn't erase your past. He rewrites it into something glorious. Your brokenness becomes the soil for breakthrough. Your weakness becomes the testimony of His strength. And though the pieces of your life may not look like much on their own, in the hands of God, they are more than enough to build something eternal. There are chapters of your life you wish you could tear out, decisions you regret, seasons you didn't see coming, relationships that left you bruised, failures that echo louder than your faith, and yet, right in the middle of what seems like the worst part of your story, God is holding the pen. He has not put it down. He's not done writing. And while you're grieving the plot twist, He's scripting a comeback that will leave you, and everyone watching, speechless. We often expect life to follow a straight line, clarity, success, favor, blessing. But God writes in curves, detours, pauses, and commas. He'll take what was meant to be your breakdown and turn it into your breakthrough. He doesn't erase what happened. He rewrites it. He folds the chaos into the composition. He weaves pain into purpose. The chapter you thought was the ending is just the turning point. God's authorship is bigger than your edits. When the enemy tries to define you by your failure, God redefines you by his faithfulness. The world may have labeled you, disqualified you, counted you out. But heaven doesn't take votes. God doesn't consult your past when declaring your future. He's not intimidated by what's happened. He uses it. Every setback, every mistake, every sin you've surrendered is being redirected. He's not just restoring the narrative. He's expanding it. You were made for more than survival. You were created for significance. And the pages you're living through now, even the ones stained with tears, are filled with divine potential. God is crafting a testimony so layered, so deep, so undeniable, that people won't see you, they'll see him. They won't applaud your strength. They'll recognize his sovereignty. What once brought you shame will now bring him glory. Some stories need the pain to make the redemption powerful. If you'd never fallen, you wouldn't know what it means to be picked up. If you'd never been lost, you couldn't testify about being found. That's the beauty of God's authorship. He uses irony. He uses reversal. He uses tension. And just when the enemy thinks the plot is over, God flips the script. The very area where you felt most defeated will become the place he demonstrates the most victory. There are seasons where you feel like nothing makes sense. You feel stuck between what was and what should be. But God is never confused. He knows the ending from the beginning. He writes with eternal ink. And while you're begging him to speed things up, he's layering the story so that when the full picture is revealed, it will minister to people you haven't even met yet. Your delays, your detours, your dark nights, they're not wasted. They're being written. You may think your story is ordinary, but in God's hands, ordinary becomes sacred. Mundane becomes miraculous. He's rewriting the chapters you thought were meaningless and giving them weight, depth, and dimension. What once embarrassed you will empower others. What you tried to hide will become what he highlights. He's not just changing what happens to you. He's transforming who you are through it. He's the kind of author who knows how to take tragedy and turn it into triumph. He doesn't delete the pain, but he redefines it. He uses every comma as a pause, not a period. What looked like a closed door is now a redirected path, and what felt like a dead end is now a divine detour. You are still on schedule, still in his plan, still part of the masterpiece that is unfolding word by word, line by line, moment by moment. You weren't written into the story to stay stuck in the valley. You're moving through it. The wilderness doesn't last forever. And once you reach the next mountaintop, you'll see why that valley was necessary. It wasn't a delay in the promise. It was development for the promise. The confusion you walked through gave you clarity. The waiting gave you weight. The silence gave you strength. And the story he's writing now is stronger because of what you survived. So, while you may be tempted to throw in the towel, to believe the lie that it's too late or too broken or too far gone, remember who's holding the pen. He didn't stop writing when things went wrong. He didn't walk away when the pain got heavy. He stayed. He's still writing. And the ending he's working on will be greater than anything you could have written for yourself. You may be looking at your life right now and wondering how it all turned out like this. You had a plan, you had a picture, you had expectations of what things would look like by now. But somewhere along the way, the picture got smudged. The plan took a turn. The people you counted on walked away. The dreams you cherished started to fade, and you've been standing in the middle of a plot you never imagined living. But just because the story changed doesn't mean it's over. The author hasn't put the pen down. He's rewriting your plot for a greater purpose than you ever envisioned. Sometimes what looks like a plot twist is actually divine redirection. You thought that relationship was forever, but it was temporary. You thought that opportunity was the breakthrough, but it was just preparation. You thought the failure was fatal, but it was actually fertile ground. God's rewrites don't erase the past, they redeem it. He takes every wrong turn, every painful chapter, and every unplanned scene and weaves it into a narrative and carries eternal weight and kingdom impact. There are parts of your story that you're ashamed of. Choices you made, paths you took, moments of weakness that still haunt you. But God is not intimidated by what you regret. He's not confused by the detours. What you see as a dead end, he sees as a setup for transformation. He's not trying to get you back to the story you had in mind. He's crafting something entirely new. And this new thing carries his fingerprint, not just your desires. You were never meant to be the author anyway. You were meant to surrender the pen. Because the one who created you knows the capacity inside of you. He knows how to pull purpose out of pain, how to dig deep into disappointment and unearth destiny. You thought your story ended with the mistake, but God is writing a sequel. And in that sequel, the broken pieces become bridges, the tears become testimonies, and the closed doors become divine detours. It's easy to trust God when the storyline is smooth, when the pieces fall into place. But real faith is forged in the middle of the rewrite, when nothing looks familiar, when you don't know how the next chapter will read. That's when trust is tested. That's when worship is purified. That's when obedience becomes costly. And it's in that space that God does his deepest work. He removes what you didn't know was hindering you and plants what you didn't know you needed. You're not being punished. You're being positioned. You're not losing your story. You're gaining one that will carry others through their darkest chapters. The very places where the ink of your life seemed to run dry will be the pages God uses to declare his faithfulness. And when others read your story, they won't just see the pain. You'll be able to point them to the God who showed up in it, the God who rewrote what seemed ruined, the God who restored what was broken. The greatest authors don't always follow predictable plots. They take you through twists and valleys, not to confuse you, but to build tension that leads to a powerful resolution. God's not writing a shallow story with surface-level impact. He's writing something eternal, something layered, something that can't be explained without him. And in order to write that kind of story, he sometimes has to tear up the one you planned and start building one that's better. There is nothing in your life that is beyond his ability to rewrite. The heartbreak, the loss, the failure, it all becomes raw material in his hands. And what the enemy meant to destroy, God will use as evidence. Not evidence of your strength, but of his sovereignty. He doesn't just rewrite for comfort. He rewrites for calling. And when he does, you'll begin to see how every broken scene was actually part of your preparation. You don't need to understand the whole plot to trust the process. What you need is to surrender the desire to be the writer and embrace the role of the character being shaped by the one who sees the end from the beginning. The version of your life you were trying to hold on to was too small. God's rewrite expands it, deepens it, refines it. And what felt like loss becomes the launch point into something far greater than you imagined. So while you may still be grieving what could have been, don't miss what's becoming. While you're trying to go back to the last chapter, God is turning the page. What's ahead is not just continuation, it's elevation. He's not just patching things up, he's doing a new thing entirely. And that new thing is birthed through surrender, refined in fire, and revealed in time. You are still his story in progress, and what he writes next will bring glory out of every place you thought was wasted.